Naomi Bennett, a black attorney, was wrongly arrested by officers Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark while reading in a park. The viral incident fueled outrage. Determined, she sued the police. Later, as a judge, she presided over their case, choosing justice over revenge, setting a powerful legal precedent. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Fort Collins, Colorado, as Naomi Bennett sat on a park bench, lost in the pages of a thick legal book. For a woman who had spent years defending justice in the courtroom, these stolen moments of peace were rare and precious. But the tranquility didn't last. A police cruiser screeched to a halt nearby. Two officers, Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark, stepped out, scanning the park with intent. Their eyes locked onto Naomi, the only black woman sitting alone. A simple moment, a peaceful afternoon, was about to unravel in ways none of them could have imagined. "Ma'am, may we speak with you for a moment?" Reese's tone was clipped, his posture rigid. Naomi looked up, sensing suspicion rather than concern in his voice. She remained composed. She had spent years dissecting the law. Now, she was about to become its victim. "Of course," she replied, closing her book carefully. "We got a call about some suspicious activity in the area," Clark added, his hand resting near his belt. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious activity? Sitting on a park bench with a book? I live here. I'm reading. Is that a problem?" "We'll see," Reese muttered, extending a hand. "Let's see some ID." Her pulse quickened, but her demeanor remained steady. She knew her rights. She knew this wasn't about safety. It was about power. "On what grounds?" Naomi asked. Reese's patience snapped. "It's routine," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. A small crowd gathered, their murmurs growing. Among them, Sophia Lane, a young woman with a phone raised, capturing every second. Naomi saw the camera and felt a surge of silent validation. This wouldn't be buried. She sighed, reached for her wallet, and handed over her ID. Reese examined it, reading her name aloud with a sneer. "Naomi Bennett. And what's your business here?" "I just told you," she said, measured but firm. "You're getting smart with us." Clark snapped. "I know the law," Naomi replied, "and I'm not breaking it." That was enough. Reese lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "You're resisting," he barked. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. Naomi hadn't moved. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. "Stop resisting," Clark repeated, his voice rising to match the growing audience. Cold metal snapped around her wrists. The waves of justice had turned against her. The system she knew turned against her. Naomi sat in the back of the police cruiser, her reflection in the window merging with the city rushing past. She had defended justice her entire life, but now justice had abandoned her. The booking process was humiliating. Fingerprinting, mugshots, a cold holding cell. The irony was staggering. A respected attorney, arrested for sitting in a park. Hours later, Leah Carter, her closest friend and colleague, arrived. "I'm fine," Naomi said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "No, you're not," Leah said, eyes flashing with fury. "But we're going to fix this." Naomi inhaled deeply. "I'm not letting this slide. Leah, not this time." Fighting back, and an unbelievable twist of video Sophia Lane had captured went viral overnight. The injustice was clear. A black woman, a defense attorney, treated like a criminal for simply existing. Naomi built a case, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered beneath the weight of a broken system. As she prepared for court, her phone rang. It was a case assignment. Her breath caught in her throat. The defendants? Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark. The judge? Her. Fate had unraveled in a way neither she nor they could have imagined. Justice had come full circle. The night air was crisp as Naomi Bennett sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of legal pads and open law books. The events of the past few days had unfolded faster than she could process. An arrest that should never have happened. A moment of injustice that would not be ignored. Across the table, Leah Carter watched her friend intently. "You haven't slept, have you?" Leah asked, her voice tinged with concern. Naomi let out a tired chuckle, shaking her head. "Sleep can wait. This case won't build itself." Leah exhaled, leaning back in her chair. This case was more than just legal paperwork. It was a fight for justice. The officers who had arrested Naomi without cause, Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark, were now under scrutiny, not just from the public, but from the very system they had once manipulated. The viral video recorded by Sophia Lane had sparked something bigger than Naomi had anticipated. It wasn't just about her wrongful arrest anymore. People were coming forward, sharing their own stories of being mistreated, dismissed, or outright ignored by the justice system. Leah tapped the file in front of her. Have you seen this? Naomi glanced at it. Jordan Wells. Another case, another injustice. Jordan had been pulled over for a minor traffic violation, only to be forcefully dragged from his vehicle and pinned to the ground. Same officers? Naomi asked. Same pattern, Leah confirmed. Naomi inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of it all. This wasn't just about her fight anymore. It was about exposing a system that had protected these officers for far too long. The turning point days later. Naomi entered the courthouse, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floors. She was no longer the accused. She was here to hold those who had wronged her accountable. The courtroom was packed. At the prosecution table, Isaac Turner, a seasoned lawyer with a quiet intensity, prepared his opening statement. Across from him, Harrison Doyle, the defense attorney representing Reese and Clark, adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. As the hearing began, Isaac laid out a meticulous case, presenting not just Naomi's wrongful arrest, but a disturbing pattern of misconduct by the officers. He called Jordan Wells to the stand, allowing him to share his story. They never gave me a chance, Jordan said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. I followed every order. I didn't resist. But they treated me like a threat before I even spoke a word. The courtroom was silent as his words hung in the air. Naomi watched Reese and Clark from across the room. Clark shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Reese, however, remained expressionless. Did he regret what he had done? Or was he simply waiting for this to pass, believing the system would protect him once again? The unexpected revelation, the hearing lasted hours, each testimony painting a clearer picture of a system that had long favored authority over accountability. As Naomi listened, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She had spent years in courtrooms fighting for justice, yet this time, the weight of it was personal. Then, the judge overseeing the case, Gregory Shaw, cleared his throat. There's one final matter to discuss, he announced. The room tensed. Naomi glanced at Leah, who looked just as perplexed, given the evidence presented. Judge Shaw continued, It is my recommendation that this case moves forward under the review of a higher court. However, given the recent developments, he adjusted his glasses. The judicial panel has reassigned an upcoming case involving officers Reese and Clark. He turned his gaze toward Naomi. Ms. Bennett, as of next month, you will be presiding over their internal review hearing. A hush fell over the courtroom. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Across the room, Reese and Clark finally reacted. Reese's face paled, while Clark swallowed hard. The very people who had humiliated her, who had stripped her of her dignity, would now stand before her, awaiting judgment. Fate, it seemed, had decided that justice would not just be served, it would be poetic. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand steps of the courthouse as Naomi Bennett adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. Today wasn't just another day in court. It was a culmination of weeks of tireless work, pushing for justice in a system that too often turned a blind eye. She glanced at Leah Carter, her closest ally in this fight, who stood beside her with arms crossed. Ready? Leah asked, her voice steady. Naomi exhaled. She had fought in courtrooms before, but this case was different. It was personal. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The case against Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark, the officers who had falsely arrested Naomi, had gained national attention. Their history of racial profiling and excessive force had come under intense scrutiny. This wasn't just about Naomi anymore. It was about every person they had mistreated. Naomi took her seat at the prosecutor's table alongside Isaac Turner, who had led the case against the officers. Across the room, Harrison Doyle, their defense attorney, whispered hurriedly to his clients. Reese sat stiffly, his jaw clenched, while Clark fidgeted with his tie. The door to the judge's chamber swung open, and Gregory Shaw took a seat. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. The tension was palpable. The evidence unfolds as Isaac Turner laid out the prosecution's case. Naomi watched the officers closely. The footage recorded by Sophia Lane played on the screen, a moment frozen in time, where Reese and Clark had forcibly detained Naomi without cause. The courtroom was silent as the video ended. This isn't just about one wrongful arrest, Isaac stated, his voice firm. This is about a repeated pattern of abuse. Officers Reese and Clark used their badges not to protect, but to intimidate. The prosecution called Jordan Wells to the stand. Jordan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the edges of the witness stand. They pulled me over for a broken taillight, he said. Before I could even explain, they had me on the ground, knee on my back. I wasn't resisting. I was just scared. Naomi glanced at Clark, who avoided her gaze. Reese, however, remained motionless, his expression unreadable. Isaac pressed on. And did they ever provide a valid reason for their use of force? Jordan shook his head. No, they treated me like I was guilty before I even opened my mouth. The weight of his words settled over the room. Naomi felt something stir within her. She knew that feeling all too well. The defense struggles when it was Harrison Doyle's turn. He straightened his tie and adjusted his stance, his voice taking on a practiced smoothness. My clients acknowledged that mistakes were made, but let's not paint them as villains. Law enforcement is unpredictable. They have to make quick decisions, sometimes under extreme pressure. Naomi's hands clenched beneath the table. Quick decisions? Reese and Clark hadn't been reacting to danger. They had created it. As Doyle attempted to spin a defense, Naomi noticed Clark's growing unease. He shifted in his seat, finally looking at Reese, who remained cold and indifferent. It was subtle, but Naomi recognized it. The first crack in their unity. A verdict that matters after hours of testimony. Judge Shaw leaned forward. I have reviewed the evidence and the arguments presented. Officers Reese and Clark demonstrated a reckless abuse of power. Their actions were not mistakes. They were choices. A heavy pause. Effective immediately, Officers Reese and Clark are suspended without pay pending further disciplinary review. Additionally, this court recommends an independent investigation into past cases involving both officers. Naomi let out a slow breath. It wasn't the harshest sentence, but it was accountability. And that was a start. As the courtroom emptied, Naomi caught Clark looking at her. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something. But instead, he turned and walked away. Reese, however, didn't even glance in her direction. Leah touched Naomi's arm. You did it. Naomi nodded. This wasn't just a victory. It was a turning point, and she wasn't done yet. The day was overcast, the kind of gray sky that seemed to hang heavily over the city, mirroring the weight in Naomi Bennett's chest as she walked up the courthouse steps. Today was not just another trial. Today, she would witness the culmination of everything she had fought for. At her side, Leah Carter adjusted the strap of her bag, her expression unreadable. This is going to be different, Leah said. Naomi nodded, but she didn't speak. She knew what Leah meant. This wasn't just a case. It was a reckoning. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark, the officers who had unlawfully arrested Naomi, sat at the defense table, their postures stiff. Opposite them, Isaac Turner flipped through his notes, his expression set in quiet determination. Naomi took her seat behind Isaac. She wasn't just another observer. She was the reason they were here. A system under scrutiny, Isaac rose first, his voice even and controlled. Your Honor, this case is not about one mistake. It is about a history of unchecked power. Officers Reese and Clark have a documented pattern of discriminatory policing. Today, we finally have the chance to hold them accountable. From the defense table, Harrison Doyle barely flinched. He was good, seasoned, sharp, and unshakable. The prosecution is asking us to condemn officers who have dedicated their lives to serving their community. Doyle countered, his tone smooth. Were there errors in judgment? Perhaps. But let's not pretend these men are criminals. Naomi's hands curled into fists under the table. She had been a defense attorney. She knew the game, and she knew how dangerous these justifications could be. Then Isaac called Jordan Wells to stand. The young man walked up, straightening his shoulders. His hands tightened around the edges of the witness stand as he took his oath. Mr. Wells, can you recount your experience with officers Reese and Clark? Isaac asked. Jordan took a breath. I was walking home. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But they pulled up, said I matched the description, and before I could even ask what they meant, I was on the ground. The courtroom was silent. Did you resist? No. Isaac let the answer sit before speaking again. Did they ever explain why you were detained? No. Across the room, Naomi saw Clark shift in his seat, his jaw tightening. Reese, however, remained still, unapologetic. Truth in the open when the defense had their turn, Doyle attempted to poke holes in Jordan's story. Is it possible you misunderstood the officer's intentions? Jordan's eyes darkened. No. Could it be that the officers were responding to a real threat in the area? Jordan's lips pressed together. I was the only one there, he said. The tension in the room deepened. Naomi had seen it before. The way authority tried to twist reality into something more palatable, more convenient. But today, the truth was standing tall. A decision that matters after hours of testimony. Judge Gregory Shaw leaned forward. I have considered the evidence presented. Officers Reese and Clark engage in behavior that contradicts the very purpose of their role. This court recommends immediate suspension and an independent investigation into their past cases. It wasn't the harshest ruling, but it was a step, a recognition. As the courtroom emptied, Naomi caught Clark looking at her. For the first time, there was something in his eyes, something close to regret. But Reese? He didn't look back. Leah exhaled beside her. It's not over, she murmured. Naomi nodded. No, she agreed. But it's a start. The courtroom was eerily silent as Naomi Bennett took her seat at the front. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she had carried greater burdens before. Today, she wasn't here to fight for herself. She was here to ensure justice for those who had long been ignored. Beside her, Leah Carter glanced toward the defense table, where Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark sat. Their expressions were a contrast. Clark's hands were clasped tightly, his knee bouncing slightly, while Reese leaned back, his gaze sharp but unreadable. They had once seen themselves as untouchable. Now they were defendants. At the prosecution table, Isaac Turner was already arranging his notes. Across from him, Harrison Doyle whispered something to his clients. Naomi had argued cases against Doyle before. He was cunning, meticulous, and always prepared to manipulate a narrative to suit his needs. The door to the judge's chambers opened, and Gregory Shaw entered. Court is now in session. The bailiff called. The trial had begun. Laying bare the truth, Isaac rose first, his voice steady but firm. Your Honor, we are not here today because of a single mistake. We are here because of a pattern, one that officers Reese and Clark have carried out for years, unchecked and unchallenged. Their actions have harmed individuals, eroded trust in law enforcement, and violated the very principles they swore to uphold. The room was heavy with tension. Naomi had seen these moments before. The quiet before verdict, the moment before truth was forced into the light. Then Jordan Wells was called to the stand. He walked with measured steps, adjusting the microphone before speaking. They stopped me for no reason, he said, his voice firm. They pinned me to the ground before I had a chance to ask why. Isaac nodded. Did you resist? No. Did they ever explain why they stopped you? Jordan exhaled sharply. They didn't have to. They already decided I was guilty of something. From across the room, Clark shifted uncomfortably. Naomi watched him closely. Was he regretting what he had done? Or was he simply regretting getting caught? The defense's desperation Doyle stood next, adjusting his tie with a calculated pause. Law enforcement is not perfect. He began smoothly. Mistakes happen. But my clients are dedicated officers who have spent years protecting this city. What we see here is an effort to turn them into villains, rather than acknowledge the complexities of their work. Naomi felt a sharp irritation rise within her. She had heard this argument before, one that tried to blur the lines between accountability and excuse-making. Doyle turned toward Jordan. Is it possible that, in the heat of the moment, the officers mistook your actions for resistance? Jordan's jaw tightened. Is it possible that they assumed I was a threat before I even spoke? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Doyle frowned, but he said nothing. A moment of reckoning as the trial drew to a close. Judge Shaw leaned forward, his gaze steady. Officers Reese and Clark, this court finds that your actions constitute excessive force and abuse of authority. You are hereby suspended, and an independent review of your past cases will be conducted. Naomi let out a slow breath. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Reese's expression remained unchanged. But Clark, for the first time, looked directly at Naomi. He hesitated, then stopped. A confession almost spoken. A regret nearly acknowledged. Leah placed a hand on Naomi's arm. It's not the end, she said softly. Naomi nodded. No, but it's a step forward. The heavy wooden doors of the courthouse swung open as Naomi Bennett stepped inside. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of a long overdue reckoning settling over the room. She could feel it in the hushed whispers of the spectators, in the furtive glances exchanged between lawyers, and in the rigid postures of the two men at the defense table, Daniel Reese and Ethan Clark. This was not just another case. This was the culmination of a battle for truth, a story of power, injustice, and a long road toward accountability. A justice story that needed to be told. Across the room, Leah Carter stood near the prosecution table, her gaze sharp and unwavering. She offered Naomi a brief nod, a silent reassurance that this moment was bigger than the trial itself. This was about setting a precedent, about sending waves of justice through a system that had too often turned a blind eye. The testimony that changed everything. Isaac Turner took his place at the prosecution's podium, his voice calm, but weighted with purpose. We are here today because the actions of officers Reese and Clark were not just errors in judgment. They were deliberate abuses of power. And today, we hold them accountable. The defense table was quiet, but Naomi could see the tension in Reese's jaw and the way Clark's fingers drummed nervously against his armrest. Then, Jordan Wells was called to the stand. He adjusted the microphone, taking a breath before speaking. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was strong. I was walking home that night. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But they didn't care about that. Isaac nodded, allowing the moment to settle. What happened next? Jordan swallowed hard, the memory still fresh. They told me to get on the ground. I asked why. Next thing I knew, I was tackled. My head hit the pavement. I could barely breathe. A murmur rippled through the audience. Naomi could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest. The realization that this was not just Jordan's story. This was the story of countless others who had been silenced. From the back of the courtroom, Sophia Lane sat with her hands folded tightly. Naomi knew who she was. The woman who had captured Jordan's arrest on camera. The woman who had ensured this case would not be ignored. The defense's last stand when it was Harrison Doyle's turn to speak. He adjusted his suit with the ease of a man who had done this many times before. The prosecution wants you to believe that officers Reese and Clark are criminals. But let's not forget, these are men who have dedicated their lives to protecting the community. Naomi felt a sharp sting of frustration. It was always the same argument, always the same excuses. Doyle turned to Jordan. Mr. Wells, is it possible you misunderstood the situation? Jordan's eyes darkened. I understood perfectly, he said. The room was silent, a decision that would echo beyond the courtroom when Judge Gregory Shaw finally spoke. His voice carried the weight of what was at stake. The evidence presented today paints a clear picture, one of unchecked authority, of a system that had protected its own at the expense of those it swore to serve. Reese remained still. Clark exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping. Officers Reese and Clark, you're found guilty of misconduct. You are hereby dismissed from the force, effective immediately. A collective breath rippled through the room. A heartwarming story of justice finally realized. Naomi glanced at Leah, who nodded. This was just the beginning. The system was unraveling, and change was finally within reach. Life often presents moments where we must choose between silence and action. Naomi Bennett's journey reminds us that justice is not given. It is demanded, fought for, and sometimes painstakingly earned. Her story is not just about the courtroom. It is about the courage to challenge what is wrong, even when it is easy to look away. For many, Injustice is a distant concept until it touches their lives. But as we grow older, we understand that the world only changes when people refuse to accept what is broken. Whether it is standing up for fairness in our communities, speaking out against discrimination, or ensuring that our own voices do not fade into the background, every action matters. For seniors, this lesson holds even greater value. Our wisdom, experiences, and resilience make us uniquely positioned to mentor the next generation. We may not all stand in a courtroom, but we can all stand for something. Justice does not belong to the powerful alone. It belongs to those who refuse to let truth be silenced. If we do not fight for what is right, who will?